I knew everything had changed when I walked into the secure data facility and smelled eucalyptus instead of the familiar ozone. The whiteboards that once held complex network diagrams were now covered in glittery vision boards filled with vacation photos and shallow quotes. I had dedicated 20 years of my life to ensuring that the digital infrastructure of our corporation remained standing, while everyone else remained blissfully unaware of the constant chaos I prevented every single day. My name is Harper, and I am 42 years old with a lifetime of experience in keeping systems operational. I have restored massive production environments using nothing more than grit and code while others panicked. I do not care about office politics or superficial team-building exercises because my focus is purely on the integrity of the data centers. For 5 years I had been the glue holding Vanguard logic together while remaining completely invisible to the upper management. Then came the new vice president of operations named Preston, who possessed more arrogance than intellect. He was the son of the founder and believed that wearing expensive shoes without socks qualified him to manage global networks. He brought his girlfriend Willow to the office, who claimed she was into spiritual alignment. She started burning sage over the server racks, which was a clear sign that my time at this company was drawing to a close. They began to dismiss my operational reports as legacy nonsense and insisted that my methods were outdated. My credentials were slowly stripped away until I was no longer invited to essential meetings about the future of the company. Willow began holding sessions in my office that focused on changing the workflow to match her personal vibe. I realized they had no intention of keeping me around once they felt comfortable enough to drive the ship into the ground. I spent my final weeks documenting every single architecture map and license schedule that kept our systems breathing. I created a robust fail-safe protocol that acted as a silent guardian for the entire infrastructure. It was not sabotage in the traditional sense, but rather a system that required my unique signature to function. If anyone misused the core access points without the correct credentials, the entire framework would automatically degrade until I personally intervened to restore the necessary permissions. On a quiet Monday morning, they summoned me to the glass office that Preston liked to call his strategic hub. Willow was lounging on the conference table sipping a green drink, while Preston looked at his phone with a smug expression. He informed me that they were restructuring operations and my role was no longer needed because my style did not align with their forward-thinking vision. I stood there and felt the cold numbness of realization wash over me. I placed my badge on the desk without any drama or hesitation. I looked Preston in the eye and told him that he had 15 minutes before everything went dark. He laughed and dismissed my words as a bluff because he truly believed that he could manage the system without my guidance. I simply turned around and walked out of the building for the final time. I felt lighter than I had in years because I knew exactly what was coming. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already vibrating with alerts from frantic employees. The payroll system had frozen, and the external data centers began reporting critical errors that Preston could not explain. I watched the chaos unfold from the safety of my own vehicle while the network I had built started to tear itself apart. Preston sent a message asking if I was still around, but I deleted it without a single second of regret. The collapse was spectacular in its efficiency. Every system I had maintained required a specific handshake and validation that only I could provide. Willow tried to fix the terminal interfaces by treating them like social media widgets, which only accelerated the cascade of failures across the global network. Within hours, the dashboards turned from green to red as the automated protocols I designed began to isolate the corrupted sectors and shut them down to prevent total hardware destruction. Preston attempted to force a full system refresh, which was the final mistake that triggered the complete lockdown. The architecture I built was designed to reject any unauthorized overrides from users lacking the primary encryption keys. As the founder Arthur returned from an international trip, he found his company dark and unreachable. He logged into his master dashboard expecting to see his empire functioning perfectly, but instead he found 13 data centers pulsing with an ominous red light. Arthur demanded to know the identity of the person who had locked the system and why no one could restore access. His assistants and contractors stood in the boardroom looking at the floor because they had no answers to provide. He realized that the only person capable of saving his corporation was the woman his son had fired for not having the right vibe. He ordered them to find me and bring me to the boardroom as fast as possible. I arrived at the office the next morning with the calm confidence of someone who had won the war before it started. The entire boardroom was filled with senior executives and legal counsel who were sweating in their expensive suits. Arthur stood at the head of the table looking like a man who had seen his fortune disappear in a single afternoon. He looked at me and asked why the entire network was completely unresponsive to his direct commands. I opened my tablet and entered a few lines of code that instantly brought the 13 data centers back to life. The red lights on the wall display flickered and shifted to a steady green, indicating that the system was finally stable once again. I looked at the board members and explained that I had not sabotaged anything because I had only removed myself from the equation. I had simply allowed the infrastructure to function exactly as I designed it. Arthur turned his gaze toward Preston and stripped him of his title in front of the entire company. Preston looked as though he wanted to defend himself, but the silence in the room was suffocating. I then pulled out the original contract I had signed years ago during a previous crisis, which included an addendum for equity compensation. The document stated that I owned a substantial controlling interest in the company because of my successful management of the infrastructure. The room tilted on its axis as the legal team verified the authenticity of my claim. I had documented everything for years, and they had ignored it all until it was too late to challenge the terms. I did not need to shout or fight because the paperwork proved that I was the one who actually owned the future of Vanguard Logic. Arthur looked at me with genuine respect and asked me to lead the company into the new era. I accepted the position not for the money or the power, but to ensure that the system would never be held hostage by incompetence again. I walked out of that building knowing that I had transformed from an invisible worker into the primary owner of the enterprise. My final lesson was simple for everyone in that room to understand. You should never underestimate the person who actually builds the walls that keep your entire world from falling apart.